Sigmund Freud revolutionized our thinking about the human mind. But who was this man? And how do his theories hold up today?
Freud really believed that he had come upon certain insights about the way the mind works that he regarded as remarkable and quite original.
Mind you, he did have insights, but if you ask in strict scientific terms, I'd be very surprised if much of it survived.
As a young doctor in the 1930s, Joseph Wirtis traveled to Vienna to undergo a training analysis with Freud. Now a psychiatrist at the State University of New York, Dr. Wirtis describes his first session.
I was rather surprised at his physical appearance. He was then well into his 70s, and he was looked extremely small and frail, and at the same time quite energetic. He spoke in a vigorous sort of professorial style, clipping his syllables, and he was direct and to the point. He said he would be glad to take me on. He stated his fee, which would be the equivalent of $20 an hour, which seems very little nowadays, but in those days in Vienna it was a substantial fee. And he said my responsibilities would be simply to expose my thoughts, my feelings, to be candid, to discuss my dreams. And he did not set a specific goal. I think his assumption was that in time material would turn up which he would interpret, or as he would say, bring to consciousness, and that's how the analytic process would unfold.
His friend and collaborator, somewhat older Viennese physician, Joseph Breuer, because Breuer had told him the story of one of Breuer's patients. The stories of a young, intelligent, well-educated woman who develops all kinds of bizarre psychological symptoms. She forgets her German, for example. She finds herself unable to drink water out of a glass. She has long lapses of attention, which appear to be hysterical in some sense. And of course, that is how later it will be called a very complicated case of hysteria. Now, Breuer, more or less by accident, comes upon the way of dealing with and disposing of these symptoms. He does so by asking her, or she in a way suggests this to him, and her share in the cure is very important, that should all be talked out, so that whenever a symptom is mentioned, that she should see if she could remember what this reminded her of. This becomes then the famous talking cure.
At first, Freud talked to his patients while they were in a hypnotic state. He believed hysterical symptoms were related to painful events from childhood. He thought that if his patients could remember and talk about the first time they experienced their symptoms, they would be relieved of their suffering. Gradually, he abandoned the use of hypnosis work. In 1895, Breuer and Freud published their findings in Studies on Hysteria. Freud detailed the case histories of 6 patients and outlined for the first time the techniques that would become the foundation of psychoanalysis. These included free association and transference, the process in which a patient transfers feelings from previous relationships onto the relationship with the analyst. But within a year, Freud announced another major discovery, his seduction theory. He claimed that hysteria was caused by sexual abuses or seductions that took place in childhood. He based this new theory on the testimony of his patients.